I wake up as usual at 6:30 in the morning. For 30 years now, my body has been wound up at this time, whether I need to be in a hurry or not. Today I don't. On Tuesdays, I don't drive to the restaurant first thing in the morning. It's my personal ritual to have morning tea in the quiet of my old house. I carefully descend the creaky stairs, holding on to the banister. At 75, you begin to appreciate solid supports. As the water boils, I look out the window at my small garden. It doesn't look like an exquisite English park, more like a lively, somewhat wayward corner of nature. Beatrice, my daughter, once said it was as stubborn and unkept as you are, Mom. It was not a compliment. I make a strong cup of tea and settle into my favorite chair. My house is small but warm and cozy. 3 bedrooms, a living room with a fireplace, a kitchen, and a small dining room. Nothing fancy, but it's enough for me. Beatrice and Lloyd, my son-in-law, think I'm barely making ends meet on a measly pension. I've never corrected that misconception. My gaze falls on a photograph on the mantelpiece. Aluin, my husband, smiles at me from the faded snapshot. He was only 37 when a heart attack took him, leaving me with an 8-year-old daughter and a pile of debt. Remember, Oluwin, how you always said I was too proud? I whispered to the pictures. You were right, but you'll never know how much. A phone call pulls me out of my memories. It's Ellis, the manager of my restaurant and probably the only person I can call a friend. Good morning, Idris. How are you today? No worse than yesterday, Ellis. What's going on? Trouble with the fishmonger. He says prices have gone up, wants to renegotiate the contract. Again? I sigh. Third time this year. Tell him to come by on Thursday. I'll talk to him myself. Are you sure? I can do it myself. Ellis, I interrupted softly, who's been haggling at the fish market at 5 in the morning for 20 years. I hear him chuckle. You, Idris. No one's better at getting the price down than you. That's right. What about this weekend's reservations? Full house for Saturday and Sunday. And that food critic called, wants to make a reservation for Friday. Okay, I nod, even though Ellis can't see it. Give him a table by the window, but not the best one. Let him know we noticed him, but not groveling. After discussing a few more details, I end the conversation. Ellis has been with me since the beginning, since the Pearl of Manchester was a tiny cafe in a not-so-wealthy neighborhood. He was a student moonlighting as a waiter when I hired him. Now he runs one of the best restaurants in the city. We've come this far together. I finish my tea and go upstairs to get dressed. I don't officially show up at the restaurant on Tuesdays, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a quiet day. I have a meeting with the accountant at 11, then lunch with the wine supplier, and then I have to stop by Beatrice's in the evening. She called yesterday, said she had something important to discuss. Usually, that meant she and Lloyd needed money. Changing into a simple but neat dress, I look at myself in the mirror. Gray hair gathered into a neat bundle, wrinkles around my eyes and mouth. Just a normal older woman. No one would have guessed that I own a Michelin-starred restaurant and have 6 zeros in my bank accounts. Sometimes I can't believe it myself. I remember 30 years ago, after Olwen's death, standing in the kitchen of our then-rented house, trying to figure out how I was going to feed Beatrice and me. The accounting skills I'd learned in college were barely enough for a modest job as an assistant in a small firm. Money was in short supply. The decision came by chance. At Oluwin's wake, everyone was praising my meat pies. You could sell them, said one of my neighbors. And I thought, why not? Started out baking to order. Then I rented a tiny space on the outskirts, worked 18 hours a day, leaving Beatrice with a neighbor. Barely made ends meet, but I saved every penny to expand. 5 years later, I had a cafe. 10 years later, a small restaurant, and 15 years later, the Pearl of Manchester in the center of the city. The price was the relationship with my daughter. She grew up feeling neglected by her mother. She never said it outright, but I could see the resentment in her eyes. When Beatrice turned 18, she left to study in London and hardly ever called. She didn't return to Manchester until after she met Lloyd when they decided to get married. By then, the restaurant was making a good profit, and I could have told her everything. But I didn't. At first, I was afraid she would take my success as confirmation that business had always been more important to me than her. Then when she introduced me to Lloyd, I sensed his self-serving nature and decided it was better to leave it at that. And then it just became a habit. My family thought I was a humble pensioner, and I didn't dissuade them. Officially, the restaurant is owned by MH Holdings. Only Ellis and my lawyer know that I'm the sole owner. I leave the house at 9 o'clock sharp. The day is clear but cool, typical Manchester October. I get into my old Vauxhall, another element of my modest pensioner image. I usually take a cab to the restaurant so that my family don't accidentally see me coming in through the front entrance. The meeting with the accountant goes well. Third quarter profits are higher than last year. We discuss tax optimization and plans for expansion. I've been thinking for a while about a second restaurant, more upscale but with the same quality. Perhaps it's time to act. After lunch with the wine supplier, he suggested an excellent Australian Chardonnay for our seasonal menu. I stop by the house to change before visiting Beatrice. I choose the simplest dress and a slightly shabby cardigan. Lloyd likes to feel superior. My daughter's house is in an upscale suburb. It's large, modern, with a perfectly mowed lawn and designer furniture. Lloyd is a middle manager at an insurance company, and Beatrice works in the marketing department of a pharmaceutical firm. Together, they earn a decent income, but the house and their lifestyle cost more than they can afford. Hence the regular request for a little help from her mom. Beatrice opens the door and gives me a hug. There's always a certain mechanical politeness in her embrace. "Mom, you're early. We just got home from work." "I'm sorry, darling. The bus came early," I lie with the ease I've developed over the years. I walk into the living room where Lloyd is sprawled in a chair with a glass of whiskey. He barely nods at me in greeting. "Ah, mother-in-law!" His voice oozes fake cordiality. "How is Manchester's most fashionable pensioner?" "Not bad, thank you, Lloyd," I reply, sitting down on the sofa. "Tea, Mom?" Beatrice asks. "Yes, please." While my daughter is in the kitchen, Lloyd continues. "How's your vegetable garden? Did you grow anything edible this year?" He knows I'm proud of my garden, and he's always finding ways to belittle my efforts. "The tomatoes were very good. I brought you some jars of sauce. They're in the bag." "Oh, another batch of homemade stuff." He wrinkles his nose. "Beatrice, your mother has decided to poison us with her experiments again." "Lloyd," Beatrice returned with tea, but without much enthusiasm. "Come on, I'm kidding," he smirked. "We all know that cooking is the only thing your mom is really good at. Too bad you can't make much money at it. If only he knew how much I make from my cooking." Instead of answering, I take a sip of tea. "So, what did you darlings want to discuss?" I ask, getting down to business. Beatrice and Lloyd exchange glances. "Mom, remember when we talked about sending Nell to music school?" Beatrice begins. Nell, my 15-year-old granddaughter, has inherited Alwyn's musical talent. She plays the piano beautifully. "Yes, of course. We found the perfect program," Beatrice continues. "It's at the conservatory with the best teachers. But it's quite expensive." "How expensive?" I ask, though I already know the answer. £6,000 a year, Lloyd replies, plus the instrument. She'll need a new piano if she wants to get serious. "I see," I nod. "What do you suggest?" "We were thinking maybe you could help." Beatrice looks at me hopefully. "You always said you were saving for a rainy day, and you have this, investments from Daddy's insurance." "Oh, yeah, investments. A legend I made up to explain my ability to help them out financially sometimes." "It's for Nell, Mom," Beatrice adds. "You want her to have what I don't have, don't you? That's a low blow?" Beatrice knows the guilt I feel for not being able to give her everything I wanted when she was a child. "I'll think about it," I reply. "I need to see how much I can spare without jeopardizing my old age." "Oh, come on, Idris," Lloyd intervenes. "Don't be so dramatic. How long do you have left? 10 years? 15 at the most? What do you need the money for? A retirement cruise?" "Lloyd," Beatrice exclaims, but again without real indignation. "Why? I'm telling the truth. Beatrice and I are working our asses off to provide for Nell, and Grandma is sitting on her savings like Scrooge McDuck. It's not fair." I look at my brother-in-law and see the greed in his eyes. He's never been interested in me as a person. To him, I was always just a potential source of money. "I'm not refusing to help, Lloyd," I say calmly. "I just want to think it over. It's a lot of money." "It is to you," he snorts. "Probably your entire fortune." Face it, you're a pauper, Idris. Living in your old house, driving a wreck, wearing clothes you bought before Nell was born. If it weren't for us, you'd be lost. Lloyd, that's enough, Beatrice finally says firmly. Mom, I'm sorry. He's just tired. We both are. The job, the mortgage, Nell and her teenage problems. It's okay, honey. I pat her hand. I understand. Life isn't easy. Where's Nell, by the way? At her friend's, studying for some test, Beatrice replies. She'll be late. Too bad. I was hoping to see her. Next time, Beatrice promises. I finish my tea and get up. I have to go. The bus will be here soon. I can drive you, Mom, Beatrice offers. No, darling. You need to rest and make dinner. That's right, said Lloyd. I'll starve to death while you're talking. Beatrice walks me to the door. I'm sorry about Lloyd, Mom. He didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I lie again. It's okay. So will you think about the money for Nell? Sure, honey. I'll call you in a couple days. We say goodbye and I walk outside. Of course, there's no bus waiting for me. I call a cab through the app and 20 minutes later, I'm home. In the evening, sitting in front of the fireplace with a nice glass of wine, another little luxury I only allow myself when I'm alone, I reflect on my situation. Maybe it's time to stop this masquerade, to tell my family the truth about who I really am. That I own a successful restaurant, that I have enough money to provide a music education for Nell and a dozen other equally talented children. But something stops me. Perhaps the fear of seeing in my daughter's eyes not remorse for years of neglect, but only greedy interest. Or the fear that Lloyd will see me as a cash cow, or just a habit of keeping things under control without revealing my cards. I take another sip of wine and look at the picture of Olwen. What would you do if you were me, darling? I ask quietly. The picture is silent, but I can almost hear his reply. Be yourself, Idris. Stop hiding. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's time for the truth, but not tonight. Tonight I'll just finish my wine and go to bed. And tomorrow is a new day and new decisions. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Beatrice, always punctual. She acted as if visits to her mother were business appointments that needed to be put on the schedule and the time frame strictly adhered to. I opened the door and saw the whole family on the doorstep. Beatrice, Lloyd, and my granddaughter Nell. It was rare for me to have such a full house. Usually my daughter came alone or with Lloyd. Mom, hi. Beatrice kissed me on the cheek. I hope we're not too early? No, of course not, I smiled. I was just finishing baking an apple pie. Come on in. Nell came over to hug me. At 15, she was almost as tall as me, thin, with hair the color of autumn leaves, like her grandfather's. Hi, Grandma, she smiled genuinely, and my heart melted as always. This girl was the only reason I still tolerated Lloyd. Hello, darling. You look beautiful. Idris, Lloyd announced himself in a loud voice, pushing his way into the hallway. Still alive and well, I see. You look fine for your age. How old are you now? 80? 75, Lloyd, I replied calmly. You ask me that every time I see you. I can't believe you're so chipper for your age. He patted my shoulder with the familiarity I'd always hated. Most people your age are either in a nursing home or on the other side of the world. Good for you. I ignored his comment and led everyone into the living room. The table was set for tea, my best china set, which the family considered old-fashioned, fresh scones, homemade jam, and, of course, apple pie, the aroma of which filled the house. Wow, grandmother, a real English tea, Nell said, sitting down at the table. They don't serve that in restaurants anymore. Your grandmother is a keeper of tradition, Beatrice said, and I couldn't tell if it was a compliment or a veiled criticism. Lloyd looked around at the table and hummed, Is there no whiskey for tea, or do you still follow the old-fashioned rules? There's a bottle in the sideboard, I replied. You can serve yourself. While Lloyd poured himself a generous portion, I poured the tea and began to slice the cake. Beatrice tried to refuse. I'm watching my figure. But Nell took a large piece and eagerly ate it. Divine, Grandma, she said with her mouth full. Why didn't you open a cafe or something? You'd do better than half the places in town. I almost choked on my tea. If she only knew. Oh, it takes money, darling. Big money, which your grandmother never had, Lloyd interjected, returning with a glass of whiskey. Not everyone has the financial acumen your father had. I don't know, Nell shrugged. Miss Pratt opened a small bakery after she retired, and she's doing very well. Minus Ms. Pratt? Lloyd interjected. My music teacher. She's 65, and she opened a bakery near the school. There's always a line there. Well, maybe she had some savings, Beatrice said, glancing nervously at her husband. Or help from family. Mother, we wanted to talk to you about a music school for Nell. You promised to think about it. Oh, yes, the money, the real reason for their visit. I've thought about it, I said, sipping my tea. And I thought I could help. Not the whole amount, but most of it. Beatrice's face brightened. Did it? Oh, Mother, that's so wonderful. Nell, you see, Grandma will help with your music school. Nell looked embarrassed. Thank you, Grandma, but, are you sure? I don't want you to spend your life savings on me. Don't worry, dear, I stroked her arm. I have enough. Ha! Lloyd took a big gulp of whiskey. Enough is a big word. How much can you spare? A couple thousand? Out of the measly interest you get on your investments? Lloyd, Beatrice threw him a warning glance. What? I just want to make sure Idris doesn't leave herself destitute. We're looking after her, aren't we? I can spare 4,000 pounds a year, I said firmly. The rest you will have to cover yourself. Beatrice looked surprised. 4,000? Mother, that's very generous. But are you sure you can afford it? Yes, dear. I told you I've been saving for a rainy day. I think it's coming. Lloyd frowned. That's odd. I always thought you were barely making ends meet. Where's all this money coming from all of a sudden? I'm frugal, Lloyd. And as you like to remind me, I don't have a lot of money to spend at my age. I allowed myself a slight smile. But 4,000, he shook his head. That's a lot of money. Nothing is too much for Nell. I looked at my granddaughter, who was clearly feeling uncomfortable. You're talented, dear, and you deserve a better education. Thank you, Grandma. She smiled weakly. But I'm really uncomfortable. Come on, Nell, Lloyd interrupted her. Grandma wants to help. It's the right thing to do. After all, what else is she going to spend her money on? It's not like she's taking it to her grave. Lloyd! Beatrice exclaimed. What? I'm just stating the obvious. Idris is part of the family. A family is supposed to help each other. We take care of her. She helps with Nell's expenses. It's only fair. I felt anger building up inside, but I held back. Lloyd had never taken care of me. He just tolerated my existence and periodically capitalized on it financially. How are things going at work, Lloyd? I asked, changing the subject. Beatrice said you were up for a promotion. Lloyd pouted. Yes, I am. Mr. Fitzgerald is retiring at the end of the year, and his position will almost certainly fall to me. Regional manager, nothing more, nothing less. That's a big increase in both status and salary. Congratulations, I said. It's something to celebrate. We're already planning it, Lloyd nodded. If everything is confirmed in November, we'll have a real party. A restaurant, champagne, all the usual stuff. Sounds wonderful? I sipped more tea. Maybe I could join you, as a thank you for taking such good care of me. Lloyd choked on his whiskey. You? At the restaurant? Well, I don't know, Idris. It's not going to be a cheap diner. We're talking about a decent place. You'd feel out of place. I think Grandma would fit in just fine in any restaurant, Nell interjected. She's a lot more sophisticated than you think, Dad. Lloyd laughed. Of course she is, of course she is. I'm just not sure Idris would be comfortable. These modern restaurants, you know. Complicated menus, fancy dishes. Not like the good old English food she's used to. I can adapt, Lloyd, I said dryly. After all, I'm only 75, not 105. All right, if you insist, he said. Just don't complain later that you didn't like it or that it was too expensive. I won't, I promised. Beatrice, clearly wanting to lighten the atmosphere, began to talk about her successes at work. The new marketing campaign she had developed had been a great success and had been praised by the management. I listened with genuine interest. Despite our difficult relationship, I was always proud of her professional accomplishments. So now I'm in charge of a whole team, she finished. 6 people under me. That's wonderful, dear, I smiled. You've always been a leader by nature. Yes, just like my father. Lloyd poured himself another whiskey. Alwyn was a leader too, wasn't he, Idris? Yes, I answered quietly. He was. Alwyn did have leadership qualities, but he didn't live to an age when he could really show them. Death took him too soon. What about you, Nell? I asked, turning to my granddaughter. How was school? Besides music, what are your hobbies? Nell perked up. Well, actually, I've recently become interested in cooking. We have a club at school and we cook different dishes. Last week I made a souffle and Ms. Hampton said it was perfect. She did? I couldn't hide my joy. That's wonderful, dear. Soufflés are not an easy dish. Oh, come on, Lloyd said. What's complicated about it? You beat the eggs and pop it in the oven. Actually, I said, not holding back, making the perfect soufflé requires precision, attention to detail, and an understanding of the chemical processes. It's a kind of art. Listen to her, Lloyd grinned. Our Idris is a Michelin-starred chef. Maybe you should have opened a restaurant instead of baking pies for the neighbors. If only he knew how close he'd come to the truth. Maybe, I said calmly. But as you pointed out, it takes money and business acumen. Exactly, Lloyd nodded. And you've never had either. Otherwise, you wouldn't be living in this old house on the outskirts of town? I like my house, I said. It's full of memories. Yes, sentimentality is another drawback to success in business. Lloyd finished his whiskey. Beatrice, we should go. I have work to do tonight. Of course. Beatrice began to collect the plates. Mom, it was delicious as always. Leave it, dear. I'll clean it myself. I stopped her. You go ahead. And thank you for stopping by. Nell hugged me goodbye. The pie was amazing, Grandma. Maybe you could teach me someday. I'd love to, dear. Come back anytime. Yeah, just call first, Lloyd interjected. Grandma might be busy doing her retirement thing. Bridge, knitting, health complaints. You know how it is. Nell threw her father a disgruntled look, but remained silent. Thanks again for your help with the music school, Mom, Beatrice said, kissing me on the cheek. You have no idea how important it is to Nell. Anything for my granddaughter, I replied, looking at Nell with love. After walking them to the door, I returned to the living room and began clearing the table. Lloyd had left an almost untouched piece of pie. He always defiantly ignored my baked goods, even though I knew he loved sweets. Another little way of showing his disdain. Finished cleaning up, I called Ellis. Hi, Idris. His voice sounded warm as always. How was the family visit? The usual, I sighed. Lloyd was insufferable. Beatrice was only worried about money, and Nell was nice. Did you give them money again? I could hear the disapproval in Ellis's voice. This time for Nell, music school. I understand, but how long are you going to put up with this, Idris? Your son-in-law is a bore and your daughter lets him treat you like this. I know. I sank back in my chair tiredly. But what can I do? They're my family. You can tell them the truth, Ellis said firmly. Tell them who you really are. Show them what really financed their comfortable lives all these years. I'm sure it would make them change their attitude. Or turn them into even more greedy and demanding, I objected. You don't know Lloyd like I do. If he finds out about the restaurant and my condition, he won't rest until he's squeezed every last penny out of me. Then why keep in touch with them at all? Ellis asked. You deserve better than this. I paused, staring at the picture of Alwyn. Because of Nell, I said finally. She's the only one who reminds me of Alwyn. The same smile, the same eyes. And she's a good girl, Ellis. Not like her parents. Then deal with her directly. She's 15, she's old enough. Maybe you're right, I sighed. By the way, Lloyd mentioned that they were going to celebrate his promotion at a restaurant. A real celebration, as he put it. Minus I? Ellis sounded curious. And I was thinking, what if they celebrated at the Pearl? You want to invite them to our restaurant? Ellis sounded surprised. Are you sure? Not exactly an invitation. I'd pretend I'd won a certificate or something. And then, see the look on their faces when they found out the truth. Ellis laughed. That would have been fantastic, especially the look on your brother-in-law's face. I'd pay a lot to see that. You won't have to pay, I grinned. You'll be there, front row. Are you serious? I wondered for a moment. Was I really ready to reveal my secret after all these years? To endure the shock, the disbelief, perhaps the anger of my family? But then I remembered Lloyd's condescending tone. His constant humiliation, Beatrice's neglect, and something inside me strengthened. Yes, I said firmly. I meant it. No more hiding. It's time they found out who I really am. Good, I could hear the approval in Ellis's voice. When are you planning on doing it? Lloyd said he'd know about the promotion in November, so I'm thinking early December. We need to be prepared. I'll help, Ellis promised. It would be a night they'd never forget. I hope so, I said, because I definitely won't forget it. When I finished talking, I went to the window and looked out at my garden. It was getting ready for winter. The leaves were falling and the flowers were fading. But I knew that in the spring it would come alive again, more beautiful and stronger than before. Maybe the same would happen to my life after I revealed my secret. The December evening was surprisingly clear for Manchester. No rain, just a light drizzle and a starry sky. I stood at my bedroom window looking outside, trying to calm my nerves. Today was a day I was both looking forward to and dreading. Lloyd had gotten his promotion a week ago. As I'd anticipated, he'd immediately started bragging and planning a grand celebration. That's when I offered my gift, a certificate for dinner at the Pearl of Manchester, which I had supposedly won in a charity raffle. You? You won dinner at the Pearl? Lloyd didn't hide his surprise. It's one of the best restaurants in town. You have to make reservations a month in advance. I guess I got lucky, I said. A certificate for 4, just enough for the 3 of you and me. Lloyd had been hesitant at first, but the idea of dining at an upscale restaurant without spending a penny quickly seduced him. I'd made elaborate preparations for the evening. I bought a new dress, an elegant dark blue one with long sleeves and a modest neckline. Nothing flashy, but obviously expensive and stylish. I had my hair done at the salon and even allowed myself a light makeup. I wanted to look flawless when I revealed my secret. The cab pulled up at 6 p.m. sharp. I'd arranged to meet my family right at the restaurant, said I had business downtown during the day. In fact, I wanted to arrive early to make sure everything was ready. Upon entering the Pearl of Manchester, I felt a surge of pride, as always. High ceilings, soft lighting, impeccable table settings, every detail had been personally thought out by me. The walls were decorated with paintings by local artists whom I had supported since the beginning of their careers. In the center of the room stood the real gem of the restaurant, an antique grand piano on which a talented pianist played in the evenings. "Good evening, Madame Howell," James, the maitre d', greeted me. I was always called Madame rather than Mrs. in the restaurant, a small tribute to French tradition. "Good evening, James. Is everything ready for tonight?" "Yes, Madame. Table number 7, as you requested. The best view of the auditorium and the stage." "Excellent," I nodded. "Remember, up to a certain point, I'm just a guest. No Madam Howell or special treatment." "Of course, ma'am, we all understand." Ellis explained the situation. I made my way to the bar to talk to Ellis before my family arrived. He was waiting for me, elegant in his perfectly fitting suit. "You look amazing," he said, kissing my cheek. "They won't recognize you." "I hope they do," I grinned. "If they don't, it'll ruin the surprise." "Are you sure you want to do this?" I could see the worry in his eyes. "It's not too late to cancel." "No," I said firmly. "It's time." I was tired of the lies and the way they were treating me, especially Lloyd. At 7 o'clock sharp, James came to me. "Your guests have arrived, ma'am." I took a deep breath and headed for the entrance, only to accidentally run into the family in the lobby. Beatrice looked elegant in a black cocktail dress. Lloyd was pompously strutting around in a new suit that I suspected had been bought especially for the occasion. Nell, sweet Nell, wore a simple but charming ivory dress that emphasized her youth and freshness. "Mother!" Beatrice waved to me. "You're already here. Wow, you look not bad for your age?" I smiled as I finished her sentence. "No, really amazing," she said sincerely. "New dress?" "Yes, I decided that such an occasion deserved something special." "Idris," Lloyd gave me an appraising look. "Who would have thought you'd know how to dress up like that? How much did it cost? A month's pension?" "Lloyd," Beatrice snapped at him. "What? I was just wondering. It's not every day our Idris looks like a normal person, not a suburban pensioner." "You look beautiful, Grandma," Nell intervened, hugging me. "I like your hair." "Thank you, dear." I smiled at her. You look very pretty today, too. James came over to us. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? Yes. I showed him the certificate. In the name of Howell, table for 4. James checked the seating chart, even though he knew exactly where our table was. Yes. Please follow me. He led us to table 7, the best table in the restaurant. From here, we had a great view of the entire room and the stage with the grand piano. The table was set impeccably. Snow-white tablecloths, crystal glasses, silverware. Wow, Nell exhaled. It's like a movie. Yeah, it's not bad, Lloyd said, looking around. I've been in better restaurants, though. In London, for instance. I knew he was lying. Lloyd had never been to a restaurant of the Pearl's caliber. A sommelier approached our table. Good evening. Let me offer you an aperitif. Tonight we have a special champagne to celebrate. Oh, how do you know what we're celebrating? Beatrice was surprised. The sommelier cast a quick glance at me. We always try to find out about our guests in advance, especially important ones like you. Lloyd straightened up, clearly flattered. Yes, we're celebrating my promotion. I'm now regional manager at Global Insurance. Congratulations, sir. The sommelier bowed. Definitely champagne, then. He poured everyone a glass, and Lloyd immediately took a big sip. Not bad, he chugged. I've had better, though. The first course was served a few minutes later, an elegant amuse-bouche of scallops with a citrus sauce. This is art, not food, Nell said, looking at her plate. It's pathetic to eat. It's nothing special. Lloyd swallowed his portion almost without chewing. There's always more pomp than actual flavor at these places. I think it's delicious, I said, savoring every bite. The perfect combination of textures and flavors. Wow, Idris, I didn't know you were a foodie, Lloyd grinned. I thought you were more of a fish and chips kind of guy. The next courses were served with the same impeccable skill. Tuna tartare, porcini mushroom soup, truffle ravioli, lime and mint sorbet, and then the main course of lamb fillet with celery puree and cherry sauce. With each new course and glass of wine, Lloyd became increasingly loud and swaggering. He commented loudly on the interior, other diners, and the waiter's work. I noticed some of the guests throwing disgruntled glances at our table, and I felt ashamed. But I reminded myself of the purpose of the evening. Look, Idris. Lloyd leaned toward me after his 4th glass of wine. I keep thinking how lucky you are to have this certificate. It's such a fancy place, all-inclusive. I bet it's at least 500 pounds for 4. Probably, I nodded. I'm really lucky. Yeah, he smirked, because you'd never be able to afford it yourself. How much is your pension, a couple hundred a week? Lloyd, Beatrice hissed. Stop it. People are watching. Come on, I'm just kidding. He took another sip. Idris doesn't take offense. Really, Idris? Not at all, I smiled. Go on, Lloyd. What else do you think about my financial situation? He seemed surprised by my bluntness, but quickly came to his senses. Well, what is there to think about? You live in an old house you haven't renovated in 20 years. You drive a wreck that's about to fall apart. Clothes. Well, you look decent today, but usually, he made a vague gesture. Let's just say the charity stores must know you by sight. Dad, Nell exclaimed indignantly. How can you? What? I'm telling the truth. Grandmother knows she's not rich. There's no shame in that, he said. Besides, it's her own fault. All her life she's worked in some petty jobs, no career, no ambitious thinking, not like me. I always knew what I wanted, and I always got it. I could feel the anger building up inside, but I held back. It's not time yet. What did you want, Lloyd? I asked calmly. Success, of course, he puffed out his chest. A good position, a decent salary, respect, and here I am, regional manager. At my age, that's quite an achievement. Absolutely, I agreed. What about a family? Was that in your plans too? Of course, he put his hand on Beatrice's shoulder. A good wife, a smart daughter. Everything a successful man should have. And a retired mother-in-law who sometimes helps with money? I added with a slight smile. Lloyd choked on his wine. Well, that's a bonus. He laughed nervously. Though I have to admit your help with the music school was a surprise to Nell. I didn't think you could afford it. I'm full of surprises, I said, sipping my champagne. I guess you are. He refilled his glass again. But you know what's always surprised me? How you manage to look so content with your life. If I were you, I'd go crazy with boredom and no money. Maybe my life isn't as boring and poor as you think, I said. Come on, Lloyd laughed. What could possibly be interesting in the life of a 75-year-old suburban widow? TV, gardening, and going to church on Sundays. At that moment, a chef in a white tunic and high hat came to our table. Good evening. I hope you enjoyed your meal? It was delicious, Vincent, I said. As always. The chef bowed slightly. Thank you, Mrs. Howell. It's an honor to cook for you and your guests tonight. Lloyd, Beatrice, and Nell froze, looking at me and the chef. Madam Howell? Lloyd mumbled. Do you two know each other? Oh, yes, the chef smiled. Madam Howell is the owner of the Pearl of Manchester, and my boss for 15 years. There was silence at the table. Lloyd's face went pale, then red. Beatrice looked as if she had been hit on the head. Only Nell, after a moment of shock, began to smile. Thank you, Vincent. I nodded to the chef. Dessert in 10 minutes? Of course, ma'am. I've prepared your favorite chocolate fondant. As the chef left, Lloyd finally regained his composure. What the hell is going on here? Is this some kind of joke? Not a joke, Lloyd. I calmly sipped my champagne. I do own this restaurant. I have for 20 years. But, he looked around helplessly. It's impossible. You live in an old house in the suburbs. You always said you were barely making ends meet on your pension. I never said that, I corrected. You made up your mind and I just didn't refute it. Mom, Beatrice finally spoke, her voice trembling. Why? Why didn't you tell us? I turned to my daughter. At first, I didn't want you to know how hard it was for me when you were little. Then you introduced me to Lloyd, and I saw what kind of man he was, and I decided it was better to keep it a secret. What kind of man am I? Lloyd was outraged. What do you mean? Greedy, arrogant, a man who thinks money is the measure of a man's worth, I said bluntly. I was afraid that if you found out about my condition, you'd start treating me differently. Not because you respect me as a person, but because you want my money. This is outrageous. Lloyd pounded his fist on the table. How dare you talk to me like that, after everything I've done for you? What exactly have you done for me, Lloyd? I raised an eyebrow. Let you visit your own daughter and granddaughter, constantly humiliating me by insinuating that I was poor and worthless? Swindled money out of me under the guise of helping Nell? We never swindled money from you, Beatrice exclaimed. You offered to help. Yes, I did, I agreed. Because I love you and I love Nell. But every time I gave you the money, Lloyd looked at me with such superior, like he was doing me a favor by accepting my pittance. Ellis came to our table. Is everything all right, Mrs. Howell? He asked, casting a stern look at Lloyd. Yes, Ellis, thank you, I smiled at him. Meet my daughter Beatrice, her husband Lloyd, and my granddaughter Nell. Family, this is Ellis Brown, manager of the Manchester Pearl and my longest-standing friend and partner. How much are you worth? Lloyd asked bluntly, his business acumen taking over from his shock. I mean, what's your fortune? Lloyd, Beatrice exclaimed. How can you? What? It's a legitimate question, he defended himself. We are a family. We should know these things. Enough to live comfortably and not worry about the future, I answered evasively. But not enough to spend on crazy whims, and certainly not enough to support ungrateful relatives who treated me like a burden for 20 years. You know what the saddest part is? I looked around at all three of them. All these years I could have done so much more for you. Pay for a better school for Nell, help with a down payment on a house, arrange a real vacation. But I was afraid that if I told you the truth, all I'd see in your eyes was greed, that you wouldn't value me, but my money. Mother, that's not fair, Beatrice said quietly. I've always loved you. Have you? I looked into her eyes. Then why have you let your husband humiliate me all these years? Why did you never really protect me? Why did you only visit when you needed money? Beatrice couldn't find an answer. A waiter came to the table with dessert. Perfect chocolate fondues from which the hot chocolate filling spurted out at the first touch of a fork. Your dessert, Madame Howell and guests, he said with a bow. We ate in silence. Even Lloyd seemed lost for words. Nell gave me occasional glances of admiration, and Beatrice looked as if she were about to cry. When the dessert was finished, I put aside my napkin and straightened up. Well, now you know the truth. I own the Manchester Pearl, one of the best restaurants in the city. I have money, real estate, and investments. I'm not some poor old lady who needs your condescending care. And I'm not going to pretend to be one anymore. The morning after dinner at the restaurant, I was greeted with silence. I woke up in my house as usual at 6:30, and for a while I just lay staring at the ceiling. The events of last night replayed in my head like a movie. Beatrice and Lloyd's shocked faces, Nell's admiring gaze, the awkward silence over dessert. After my confession, dinner ended quickly. We finished our coffee in tense silence, and I hailed myself a cab, declining Lloyd's offer of a ride. The last thing I saw as I left the restaurant was my brother-in-law frantically counting something on a napkin. Probably my fortune. I slowly got out of bed and walked to the window. The December morning was gray and dank, typical of Manchester. On days like this, I usually didn't leave the house unless I absolutely had to, preferring the comfort of a fireplace and a cup of hot tea. But today I wanted to be in a restaurant among people who valued me not for my money, but for who I really was. Just as I was getting dressed and eating breakfast, the doorbell rang. Beatrice and Lloyd stood on the doorstep, both with strained smiles and a large bouquet of flowers. "Mother," Beatrice stepped forward, holding out the bouquet. "We thought we'd stop by and check on you. How are you feeling after yesterday?" I accepted the flowers and stepped back, letting them into the house. "Thank you, I'm fine. Come on in." They stomped awkwardly into the hallway as if they were in my house for the first time. Lloyd looked around with renewed interest as if, now aware of my condition, he expected to see hidden signs of luxury. "Tea?" I offered, coming into the kitchen. "I'd love some," Beatrice agreed hastily, following me. Lloyd was seated at the kitchen table, unnaturally straight and collected. He was usually sprawled in his chair, his whole demeanor showing that he was there under duress. "Idris," he began, clearing his throat as I set the cup in front of him. "Yeah, we wanted to apologize for yesterday. For all these years, really. I may have been, a little harsh in my remarks." "A little harsh?" I raised an eyebrow, sitting down across from him. "Okay, very harsh," he sighed. "But you have to understand, I never meant to hurt you. It was all a joke. I'm just so... I joke with everyone. It's my way of communicating." "That's odd," I said, stirring my tea. "I've never heard you joke like that with Beatrice or any of the coworkers you've told me about." Lloyd blushed. "Well, it's different with different people." He looked helplessly at Beatrice. "Mom," she put her hand on mine. "We're really very sorry. It was a shock to find out that all this time you've been, that you were such a successful businesswoman. Why didn't you tell us?" "I already explained yesterday," I replied. "At first, I was afraid you'd blame me even more for working so hard when you were growing up. Then I saw how Lloyd felt about money and success, and I thought it was better to keep it a secret." "What do you mean, how I feel about money?" Lloyd straightened up. "I'm okay with money, like everyone else." "You judge people by their financial status, Lloyd." I looked him in the eye. "All these years, you've treated me like a worthless old woman because you thought I was poor. And now that you've found out I own a successful restaurant, you're suddenly here with flowers and apologies. It's not fair," he protested. "I've always respected you. Maybe I didn't show it properly. Pathetic pensioner. Penniless old lady. Loser, that's showing respect?" I shook my head. "Don't lie, at least now, Lloyd. You're only here because you found out about my money." Beatrice looked embarrassed. "Mom, that's not true. We really want to make things right. And we're proud of you. What you've accomplished is amazing." "Yeah," Lloyd nodded vigorously. "It's unbelievably amazing. To build a business like this from scratch, all by yourself. You're a real businesswoman, Idris. I've always told Beatrice you're an amazing woman." I could barely contain my laughter. Lloyd had never said anything like that, and we all knew it. "And here I am thinking," he continued, leaning forward. "Maybe we should spend more time together. Family dinners, weekends. I could show you our latest home projects. We're thinking about an addition." And maybe you could tell me more about the restaurant business. I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. You have? I acted surprised. I thought you were always interested in a stable corporate career. You said entrepreneurs are irresponsible adventurers who can't hold down a proper job. Lloyd choked on his tea. Yep, I didn't say that. Or if I did, I didn't mean it. Well, anyway, I set the cup down on the table. I appreciate the visit, but I have things to do today. I have to be at the restaurant by 11. Oh, of course, of course. Lloyd rose hurriedly. Business first. I understand. Maybe we could get together tonight? Have dinner together? Not tonight. I shook my head. I have a meeting with my suppliers. Maybe next week. Great, he glowed. Just tell me when and we'll clear the evening. Won't we, darling? Beatrice nodded, but she looked less enthusiastic than her husband. In her eyes, I saw a mixture of emotions: embarrassment, curiosity, perhaps even guilt. But there was something else there, too: wariness, as if she didn't quite trust my motives. Mom, she said as we headed for the door. Yeah, I'd like to talk to you alone. Maybe tomorrow? Just you and me? All right, I agreed. Come to tea, about 4 o'clock. She smiled with relief. Thank you, I'll be there. When they left, I leaned against the closed door and took a deep breath. It was exactly what I'd expected. The sudden interest, the fake apology, the attempts at rapport now that they knew my financial situation. Lloyd was especially transparent, practically drooling at the thought of my money. An hour later, I was already at the restaurant, checking the preparations for dinner time. Ellis met me at the entrance. How are you? He asked with genuine concern. After last night. I'm fine, I shrugged. This morning I received a visit from some repentant relatives, with flowers and apologies. Ellis chuckled. Let me guess. Your brother-in-law has suddenly developed a deep interest in the restaurant business? And family values? I grinned. I'd never seen him so respectful. What are you going to do? I walked to my office, a small but elegant room in the back of the restaurant. Ellis followed me. I don't know yet, I admitted, sinking into a chair. Beatrice wants to meet tomorrow to talk privately. We'll see what she says. And Nell? How did she react? I smiled, remembering the admiring look in my granddaughter's eyes. She seems to be the only one who's genuinely happy for me, not because of the money, but because of the accomplishment. She's a good girl, Ellis nodded. Not like her father. Luckily, I agreed. The day passed in the usual routine: meetings with suppliers, checking menus, solving the small problems that always arise in the restaurant business. By evening, I felt tired but satisfied. This rhythm, this work, this was what made my life complete, not the rare and stressful visits to my daughter and son-in-law. I was about to leave when James, the maitre d', announced that I had a visitor waiting. Miss Nell, your granddaughter, he explained. She said she'd like to talk to you if you're not too busy. I was surprised. Nell had never come to my restaurant before. She rarely visited me alone without her parents. Sure, show her into my office, I said. A few minutes later, Nell was sitting across from me, twirling the cup of hot chocolate I'd ordered for her. She looked a little nervous, but determined. Grandma, I wanted to apologize, she began, for Daddy, for the way he's treated you all these years, and for the fact that I did nothing to stop it. You don't have to apologize for your father, honey, I said softly. You're not responsible for his behavior. But I could have said something when he was rude to you. She lowered her eyes. Instead, I just stayed silent. I was ashamed of him, but I was afraid of upsetting him. You're just a kid, Nell. It's not your job to raise your parents. She looked up at me with a look of determination in her eyes. I'm 15, Grandma. I'm not a child anymore, and I know right from wrong. The way Daddy treated you was wrong, and the way Mommy allowed it was wrong too. I was touched by her maturity. Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot to me. She took a sip of chocolate, then asked, Now will you tell me how it all started? The restaurant, I mean. How did you set it up? And I told. How after Aluwin died, I started baking cakes to sell. How I rented a tiny cafe on the outskirts of town. How I worked 18 hours a day, leaving little Beatrice with a neighbor. How she gradually expanded the business, saving every penny. How she'd met Ellis, then a student part-time waiter, and saw potential in him. How together, they'd turned a small cafe into one of Manchester's best restaurants. Nell listened breathlessly, and in her eyes I saw not only admiration, but understanding. "You're amazing, Grandma," she said when I finished. "You built all this from scratch, all alone with a small child in your arms. I don't know anyone stronger than you." "Thank you, honey," I smiled. But I wasn't all alone. I had people to help. Neighbors, friends, then Ellis and the other employees. No one succeeds completely alone. And yet, she shook her head. "What you've done is incredible. I'm proud to be your granddaughter." Those words warmed my heart more than all of Lloyd's fake praise. "Why didn't you tell us before?" Nell asked after a pause. "I never would have blabbed if you had asked me to keep the secret." I sighed. "At first, I didn't want your mom to know how hard it was for me when she was little. She already accused me of working too much and not paying enough attention to her. If she knew that all that hard work had led to such success, it could only make her resentful. Then, then your father came along, and I saw how he felt about money and status. I was afraid that if he found out about my status, he would start treating me differently, not because he respects me as a person, but because he wants my money." "Like now," Nell said quietly. I looked at her in surprise. "What do you mean?" "They've been talking about you all day today," she grimaced. "About how amazing you are, how they underestimated you, how they want to spend more time with you. Dad even offered to take you on vacation with us this summer, to Mallorca. He's never suggested that before." "I see," I nodded. "What do you think about it?" "I think it's disgusting," Nell said bluntly. "They should love you and respect you, not because of your money, but because you're my grandmother. Their mom and mother-in-law, part of the family. You're wiser than your years, Nell." I looked at her fondly. "And you're right. But people are complicated creatures. Sometimes it takes them a while to realize what's really important." "Do you think they'll understand?" There was doubt in her voice. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I'm glad that at least you do." Nell finished her chocolate and set the cup down. "Grandma, I've been meaning to ask, can I come here sometimes? To the restaurant? Maybe even, work a little? I know I'm still too young for a real job, but I could just observe, learn." "Of course, darling," I smiled. "I'd be very happy to. And I'm sure Ellis would too. He always said the restaurant needs young energy." "Did he?" She brightened up. "That would be so great. I've always been interested in cooking, and after last night's dinner, all those dishes were works of art. I'd love to learn to cook like that." "Then come over on Saturday," I suggested it. "You can meet our chef Vincent. He likes to teach young people. But, are you sure your parents won't mind?" Nell thought for a moment, then nodded firmly. "They wouldn't dare object. Not now, when they're trying so hard to impress you." I couldn't help but grin at her insight. "All right then, it's a deal. Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning." When Nell left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about our conversation. Of all my family, only my granddaughter had shown a genuine interest in who I was, not what I had. Only she apologized, not because she was afraid of losing access to my money, but because she truly regretted her silence. Ellis knocked on the door. "Is everything okay?" he asked, peering into the office. I saw Nell leave. She looked pleased. "Yeah," I smiled. "She wants to come here, to learn the restaurant business. I said she could start on Saturday." "Great," Ellis nodded. "She's going to make a good one. She's not like her parents." "No," I agreed. "Thank God she isn't." "What about Beatrice and her husband? What are your plans for them?" I sighed. "I don't know, Ellis. Beatrice wants to meet tomorrow to talk privately. We'll see what she says. But I'm not under any illusions. 20 years of neglect won't disappear overnight just because they found out about my money." "You could always just cut them off," Ellis suggested. "Focus on your relationship with Nell." "Maybe," I nodded. "But Beatrice is my daughter after all. I want to give her a chance, one chance." Ellis smiled understandingly. "You're too kind, Idris. You always have been." "Not kind." I shook my head. I hope people can change, just a little." When I got home, I sat in front of the fireplace for a long time, staring at the fire and thinking about the future. The events of the last 2 days had changed my life, revealing a secret I had kept for 20 years. Now I had to decide how to deal with my family. Should I accept their sudden respect and love, knowing that it was only due to the revelation of the truth about my financial situation, or distance myself by focusing on a sincere relationship with Nell? January was cold and snowy. From the window of my office in the restaurant, I watched large flakes fall onto the streets of Manchester, covering the city in a blanket of white. It had been a month since the night I'd revealed my secret to my family, and a lot had changed in my life. On the table in front of me lay the papers I had just signed. An educational fund for Nell. Her music education and future university studies were now secured, but with one important condition. Only she herself could receive the money, not her parents. My lawyer, Mr. Higgins, has worked out all the details. Are you sure you don't want to include your daughter and son-in-law in your financial plans? He asked when we were discussing the terms of the fund. I'm absolutely sure, I replied firmly. They are adults with good jobs. They don't need my help. The conversation with Beatrice the day after the secret was revealed was revealing. She came to my house for tea, as we'd agreed, and apologized at length for letting Lloyd treat me like that. Talked about how proud she was of my accomplishments, how she admired my strength and business acumen. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, nervously tugging at the edge of her napkin. We could have been closer all these years. We could have? I looked her in the eye. Beatrice, does my financial status matter to our relationship? Weren't you supposed to love and respect me simply because I'm your mother? She lowered her gaze in embarrassment. Of course I was supposed to. And I love you. It's just, Lloyd's always been that way. He's very sensitive about social status, and I guess I let his views affect me. And now that you know I own a successful restaurant and have money, my social status is suddenly acceptable? I didn't hide my sarcasm. Mom, that's not fair. She looked hurt. I came to apologize and you attack me. I'm not attacking you, Beatrice. I just want you to be honest with yourself and with me. You're here tonight for my money, not for some sudden love of a daughter. It's not. She raised her voice, then took a deep breath, calming down. Okay, maybe partly because of the money, but it's not just because of them. I really want to fix our relationship, and I'm proud of you. I really am. I softened, seeing her sincerity. Beatrice had always been a contradictory person, a mix of the best and worst qualities. Her father's kindness and my practicality, but also her own insecurities and approval-seeking that made her vulnerable to people like Lloyd. I want to mend our relationship too, I said, but on new terms. No more monetary gifts to you and Lloyd. No more loans that no one is going to pay back. I'll set up an educational fund for Nell that will provide for her education, but you two are adults with good jobs. You have to live within your means. I saw her face stiffen for a moment before she nodded. Of course, Mom. We didn't count on your money. But I knew it was a lie. Lloyd had already made plans for my fortune. More than once in the weeks that followed, he'd casually brought up his business ideas, hinting that with a little investment, he could start his own business. Or how he and Beatrice were cramped in their current house, and how nice it would be to move to a bigger one, but unfortunately, they couldn't afford it. I politely listened to these hints, and just as politely ignored them. Gradually, their visits became less frequent, their calls shorter. I could see the disappointment in Lloyd's eyes when he realized he wasn't going to get easy access to my money. And the strange relief in Beatrice's eyes, as if part of her was glad things were getting back to normal. The only person whose attitude toward me had really changed for the better was Nell. She kept her word and came to the restaurant the Saturday after we talked, and the following Saturday, and the week after that. Soon she was spending most weekends at the Pearl of Manchester, enthusiastically immersing herself in the world of gastronomy. Vincent, our head chef, has discovered a real talent in her. She's a quick learner, Mrs. Howell, he said with admiration. Such a sense of taste, such intuition, rare even among professionals. And she's not afraid of the work. I saw Nell change, become more confident, find her calling. She still loved music and continued to study at the music school, but cooking captured her just as much. Grandma, I think I want to be a chef, she confided to me one day as we were driving home after a particularly successful day at a restaurant. It's a combination of science and art, precision and intuition. It's like music, except instead of sounds, it's flavors and aromas. If that's what you really want, I'll support you, I said. But it's hard work, Nell. The long hours, the stress, the physical exertion. I know, she nodded gravely. I see how Vincent and the other cooks work, but I also see the satisfaction they get when they create something beautiful. When the guests are delighted with their dishes. I smiled, recognizing in her words my own thoughts that I had when I was her age. Then you must follow your dream, and I will help you in any way I can. In early February, I made an appointment with Mr. Higgins to discuss changes to my will. The previous version had been drawn up years ago and provided for an equal division of my estate between Beatrice and Ellis, with a small share for Nell. Now I wanted to change everything. I want the restaurant to go to Ellis, I told the lawyer. He's been with me from the beginning, knows the business inside and out. The Pearl is as much his brainchild as it is mine. What about your daughter? Minus Mr. Higgins asked. You won't leave her anything? Beatrice will get my house and part of the investment, I replied. That's more than enough. She's never been interested in the restaurant, doesn't understand how much work has gone into it. Ellis will take better care of the Pearl than she will. And your granddaughter? I want to make special arrangements for Nell. I smiled. She'll get 25% of the restaurant, but only if she continues to work there for at least 5 years after I die. If she decides to leave early, her share will be bought out by Ellis at market value, and that money will go into her trust fund. That's an interesting solution. Mr. Higgins made a note. You want her to earn her share. I want her to understand the value of hard work and dedication, I corrected. All the things Lloyd had never understood. When all the papers were drawn up and signed, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was as if the last weight I'd been carrying all these years had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't tell Beatrice and Lloyd about the changes in the will that would have only caused a new wave of false attention on their part. But I told Ellis and Nell. Ellis was shocked. Idris, you mustn't. I never expected. Stop it, I interrupted him. Who else deserves the Pearl more than you? You've been with me since the beginning when we were cooking in a tiny kitchen and serving only 10 tables. You know every corner of this restaurant, every vendor, every regular customer. You're the heart of this place, Ellis. He hugged me, and I could feel him shaking. Thank you, he whispered. I promise I'll take care of the Pearl as much as you do. Nell was just as touched when I told her about her share in the restaurant. Grandma, I don't know what to say. It's so generous. But why 5 years? Why not just leave me a share? Because I want you to be sure of your choice, I explained. 5 years is enough time to see if the restaurant business is really your calling. If it is, you'll get not just money, but a business you can devote your life to. If not, you'll have the means to start something of your own. She nodded thoughtfully. That's fair enough. And I think I'll stay. I can't imagine my life without the Pearl anymore. I smiled, looking at her young, spirited face. In her, I saw an extension of not only my blood, but my passion, my spirit. By the end of February, my relationship with my family had finally settled into a new format. Beatrice called once a week. We exchanged news, but without the same warmth. Lloyd was emphatically polite when we met, but in his eyes, I saw poorly concealed disappointment and even resentment. He'd expected more than a formal relationship with his rich mother-in-law, but Nell had become a real part of my life. She spent all her free time at the restaurant, soaking up knowledge, learning from everyone from Vincent to the dishwasher. Her enthusiasm and genuine interest in the business won over all the staff. They treated her not as the boss's granddaughter, but as a promising newcomer who deserved attention and respect. One evening, when the restaurant had already closed, Nell and I were sitting at a corner table, sipping herbal tea, for her, and a glass of good red wine, for me. You know, Grandma, she said, looking at the empty room, I used to think a restaurant was just a place where people ate, but now I see that it's so much more than that. It's like a theater where a new show is played out every night. It's a place where memories are made, where important moments in people's lives happen. Exactly, I smiled. The Pearl has seen countless marriage proposals, anniversaries, business deals, reconciliations. Every table has a story behind it. And you've created it all. Admiration shone in her eyes. From nothing. Not alone, I shook my head. With the help of many people. And now you're part of that story too, Nell. She looked thoughtfully at her cup. Mom and Dad think I spend too much time here. They say I should concentrate on my studies and music. What do you think? I think I've found my place, she said simply. A place where I'm not valued for my grades or whose daughter I am, but for what I do with my hands, for my ideas, my labor. I reached out and squeezed her palm. Then don't listen to anyone. Follow your heart. When I was your age, I didn't know what I wanted out of life. It took losing my husband and being on the brink of poverty for me to find my calling. You're happier. You've already found your path. At the beginning of March, the Pearl of Manchester celebrated its 20th anniversary. I decided to organize a special evening, a special menu, live music. All our regular customers and friends of the restaurant were invited. And of course, my family. Beatrice and Lloyd arrived on time, both dressed up and tense. They hadn't been to the restaurant since that evening of revelations. I hadn't invited them, and they hadn't asked. But tonight was a special occasion. Mom, everything looks amazing, Beatrice kissed my cheek. 20 years is an impressive achievement. Yes, Idris, Lloyd said. Not every restaurant lives to see such an anniversary. You should be proud. Thank you, I smiled. Come on in, your table is ready. I escorted them to a table, not in the center of the room, but not on the periphery either. A good enough place to show that they were important guests, but not the most important. Soon the hall was filled with people. Regular customers, city celebrities, suppliers we've worked with for years, journalists from local publications. They'd all come to celebrate the Pearl's anniversary. Nell was helping the waiters, dressed in an elegant uniform with the restaurant's logo. I could see the pride in her eyes as guests praised the serving and service. She was in her element. At the height of the evening, Ellis rang the glass, drawing the attention of the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, he began as the room fell silent. Tonight we are celebrating more than just the restaurant's anniversary. We are celebrating the triumph of vision, perseverance, and passion. 20 years ago, Idris Howell, a woman of unwavering determination and culinary talent, founded the Pearl of Manchester. Starting with a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, she created a place that has become synonymous with fine dining and impeccable service. Idris, on behalf of all the restaurant staff and all our guests, thank you for your dream becoming a reality. The hall exploded with applause. I stood up, tears welling up in my eyes. Thank you all, I said as the applause died down. The Pearl would not be what it is today without each and every one of you, without our chefs who create culinary masterpieces every day, without our waiters who provide impeccable service, without our suppliers providing the finest ingredients, and of course, without you, our dear guests who have supported us all these years. I paused, looking around the room. Beatrice and Lloyd were looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite define, a mixture of pride, envy, and humility. Nell was glowing with happiness, standing next to Vincent. Ellis smiled at me with a tenderness and respect that can only come from decades of working together and being friends. But today I don't want to talk about the past. I want to talk about the future, I continued, about what lies ahead for the Manchester Pearl. And I'm proud to say that the future of our restaurant is in good hands. In the hands of people like Ellis Brown, my partner and friend, without whom the Pearl would not be what it is today. And in the hands of a new generation, represented by my granddaughter Nell, who is already showing amazing talent and dedication. I raise my glass to the Pearl of Manchester, to its past, present, and future, to all of you who make it special. To the Pearl. The hall erupted in cheers and everyone raised their glasses. When the formal part was over and the guests went back to eating and talking, Nell came up to me. "It was wonderful, Grandma," she said, hugging me. "Thank you for mentioning me. I didn't expect you to." "I was telling the truth, dear," I smiled. "You're part of the future of the Pearl, and I can't think of anyone better for the role." The evening continued, filled with conversation, laughter, music, and of course, great food. I went from table to table, thanking guests for their support, reminiscing about shared stories, and making plans for the future. When I finally sat down to rest, Ellis approached me with a glass of champagne. For the founder and soul of the Pearl, he said, holding out the glass to me. You did it, Idris. Everything we dreamed of 20 years ago has become a reality. We did it, I corrected, accepting the glass. Together. He sat down next to me and we watched the festivities in silence. Nell was helping the waiters, moving between tables with the grace and confidence that only comes with experience and a love of what she did. Beatrice and Lloyd were engaged in polite conversation with one of the city councilors sitting at a nearby table. Vincent came out of the kitchen to personally present a special anniversary dish, and the room erupted in applause. You know, Ellis said after a pause, when you first hired me, a student with no experience or knowledge, I thought it was a temporary job, a way to pay the bills while I studied. I never imagined it would become my life's work. I saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself yet, I smiled. Just like I see it in Nell now. She looks a lot like you. He nodded toward my granddaughter. The same determination, the same attention to detail, and the same passion for creating something special. Yes, I agreed. Maybe that's where the real legacy lies. Not in money or property, but in the passion we pass on to the next generation. Ellis raised his glass. To the legacy of Idris Howell, to the Pearl of Manchester and everyone who makes it special. I clinked my glass with his and took a sip of champagne, feeling the bubbles tickle my throat. Looking at the festivities around me, at the people who had gathered to celebrate my dream 20th birthday, I felt a deep satisfaction. It no longer mattered that Beatrice and Lloyd had never really appreciated me before they found out about my condition. It didn't matter that for 20 years I had hidden my success for fear of their reaction. What mattered was that now, in this moment, I could finally be myself. Idris Howell, the creator of the Pearl of Manchester, the woman who started from scratch and built something beautiful and lasting. A woman whose legacy would live on in Ellis's work and Nell's talent. And that was the real victory in this. Not in seeing the shock on Lloyd's face when he learned the truth, but in the freedom to be herself without hiding behind the mask of a humble retiree. The joy of sharing my experience and knowledge with my granddaughter, who saw me not as a source of money but as a source of inspiration. I took another sip of champagne and smiled. Life was beginning anew, and at 75 I finally felt truly free.